Good afternoon, subscribers. Today, in this particular video, I want to go through with you the AS paper from June 2018, and I'm going to be looking at the micro and macro multiple choice sections and just pulling out a few questions which my candidates struggled particularly with, and maybe you had similar problems as well. So here you can see this is the AS level micro paper. I've got the A level macro paper all teed up as well. And what I have done is, and maybe your teacher has done this for you as well, it's possible via OCR Interchange to log into that, so that's staff members only, and you can download a record, which is a summary really of how a particular group of candidates have performed in a particular set of questions. So this, for example, this is the micro report, and where it's highlighted in red, this is an indication of where the candidate has obviously got the question incorrect. Now you'll be familiar, of course, with the fact that it starts off with 15 multiple choice questions. And multiple choice questions are, people think, oh, multiple choice is easy. Multiple choice questions are difficult, and it's an easy place to lose quite a significant number of marks. Now, I think that this shading here is really useful. Certainly for me and for my class in the last couple of lessons, it's been really useful to just look at these to see where most candidates are getting the answers correct, such as number 6, for example. Everybody got that question correct. But then also to see where candidates are struggling. And not only can we see that my candidates are struggling, but it also shows the national picture here as well, and we can see where this has been nationally problematic. So this particular question 9, this was problematic nationally, 12 problematic nationally. So it's really useful this. So I've got one of these for the micro and one as well. I'll just show you that briefly. Got one for the macro as well. So again, there's a bulk of questions here. So that's 8, 9 and 11 where candidates were getting the questions wrong. And of course it's a great way for us to practice together questions which candidates are finding difficult, so that in the future the marks are hopefully lifted and improved. So, without further ado then, ladies and gentlemen, let's get cracked into the microeconomics questions. So the microeconomics questions we're going to look at are 1, 4, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13 and 14. Those are the ones which my candidates particularly got wrong, and those are the ones that I'm going to concentrate on. So let's bring up the micro paper. Here we go. Let's just have a quick look then. We're going to have a look through these multiple choice questions. So question 1, first of all. Now, of course, the remarkable thing is that candidates should be getting question 1 incorrect. Theoretically, these should be getting a little bit harder as we move through, and you should be treated to a relatively easy question to begin with. But for my candidates, question 1 proved a little bit problematic. So, a farm decides to reduce its production of strawberries to increase its production of raspberries. So immediately here we can sense that there's a little bit of a trade-off going on, in that you can't have more of both. They are in effect competing with one another. What is the relationship between the goods? So we know it's production, so therefore we know it's supply. So we can immediately rule out A and D. And then it's simply a question of, well, is it B or is it C? Well, composite supply, as I'm sure you well know, refers to raw materials particularly, which have many different uses and are supplied in many different goods. So it can't be C, it has to be B, competitive supply. And this notion of having to give up some of good A, strawberries, in order to produce more raspberries, that really nails the answer for that one. So that one is B, ladies and gentlemen. Next question is question 4. Let us scroll down to question 4. Ah, right, okay, I remember. Which of the following statements about average fixed costs is true? Well, immediately I see that, I'm thinking of my short-run average cost curve diagram. Short-run average cost curves. And I'm sure you'll be familiar with this. If you're not, then you need to be getting familiar with it. So we've got costs and output. And the short-run average cost curves are, as you know, a TC, a VC, gap between them narrowing for reasons which we'll not go into at this time, marginal cost going through the minimum point of ATC and AVC, and then the one that we're really interested in is, of course, the AFC, falling continuously. And why does it fall continuously? Because total fixed costs are constant all the time. So total fixed costs, if you just draw that on a curve, it would be a straight line. Let's say a cost of 100. So the average, when the output is 1, the average is obviously 100. The average, when the output is 10, and so on. And so as output increases, the average falls continuously. So let's now go back to our question sheet and see what the options are. AFC declines as a firm increases output, looks like the answer to me. Does not change, no. Increases as output increases, no. Will always be greater than price, absolutely not. So it is, ladies and gentlemen, 4A. Next one, question 8. Let's move this on to question 8. Alright, now, question 8, 9 and 10 I've got on my list, I can see in front of me. Now, 8 is an elasticity question, 9 is an elasticity question, 10 is an elasticity question. Expect questions on elasticity. Why? Because the example would know that you find it difficult. So they're going to make life that little bit more testing for you. It is a test after all. It's an assessment. Okay, so good X has an income elasticity of minus 1.25. The quantity of good demanded rises from 48,000 to 60,000. Which change in income must have occurred? Okay, let's flick to a clean page here and let's sort this one out. So we need knowledge of YED. So that's our income elasticity of demand equation, which is equal to the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in income. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, this pen is not working that well on the board. Percentage change in Y, which is income. So that's our equation for income elasticity of demand. Okay, so what are we told in the question? Well, we're told that the value in this instance is minus 1.25. So that's the value of YED. And we're also told that that is the answer, that is the value of YED whenever quantity demanded goes from 48,000 to 60,000, or in effect from 48 up to 60 over the percentage change in income. So now it's simply a question of working out that as a percentage, and then we can find the missing value. So 48 to 60, so that's obviously 12 over 48. So what's that come down to? 1 over 4, 25%, and it's moving upwards from 48 up to 60, so that is a plus, or an increase, plus of 25%. Okay, so something into 25% gives us minus 1.25. Okay, now the other thing that we need to be aware of course, is that because this is up and this is negative, so that's positive, that's negative, then this value will have to be in a downwards direction. It's going to have to be a fall. on the bottom line in order to give us a negative outcome here of minus 1.25. So what divided into 25 will give us minus 1.25. So we flick back to our answer sheet, or our potential answer sheet, and we're clearly looking for fallen, so it's either A or B, and then it's whatever over 25 divided by whatever here, either 16 or 20 will give us minus 1.25, and in this instance the answer will be B. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is your answer. Okay, I said elasticities were a problem, so let's move to the next elasticity question, which is on cross price elasticity. Okay, let me again it's not really essential to know the equation for this particular question, but let's just give it anyway, it's good revision. So XED, which is cross price elasticity of demand, is equal to the percentage change in the quantity demanded of good A divided by the percentage change in the price of good B. Now, you don't necessarily need to know that for this equation, for this question, but you do need to know that if your answers are greater than 1, then we're talking about substitutes, or not even greater than 1 actually, ladies and gentlemen. Let me amend that, my apologies. What we're looking for in this instance is, we can of course talk about the values, but more specific to this question, if the value is positive, then we're talking about substitutes. If it's negative, we're talking about complements. So, let's look at the values that we're presented with. 0.5 positive, so substitutes. 1 positive, so substitutes. Okay, so we're dealing with substitute goods here. X and Y, these are substitutes for one another. What will happen when the price of X falls? Well, if they're substitutes for one another, and X is cheaper than Y, then you'll consume more X and less Y. And similarly here, you'll consume more X and less Z. So in both instances, there will be a fall in the demand for Y in this case and Z in this case, and hence the answer for this one is 9A. Okay, and then lastly, elasticity of supply this time. So again, we don't really need to know the equation for this one, although percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price in this instance. So which will change the price elasticity of supply? So when you're thinking about that, always have in your mind elasticity of supply. Just have the diagram in your mind. So there's a very elastic supply curve, and there's a very inelastic supply curve. And that's what you want to be thinking about. Envisage that when you're thinking about this question. Which would reduce the price elasticity of supply for a product? So in other words, which would make the price elasticity of supply more likely to pivot from elastic and make it more inelastic? What the question's asking. A decrease in stocks. Now that could very well be the answer, couldn't it? Because if you have a reduction in stocks, demand for your product goes up and you sell out of the product and you don't have enough left, then you'll not be able to bring forward more supply. So that's a potential answer. A decrease in time it takes to produce the product. Well, that means you can produce it faster, so you could get more into the marketplace quickly. That would make it more elastic. An increase in the degree of substitutability of the factors used to produce the product. Again, that would suggest you can produce it faster. An increase in spare capacity, again, that would suggest that you, if needed, you could ramp up production to meet extra demand. So it all pointing at A, 10A, and 10A is the correct answer in that instance. Okay, 12, ladies and gentlemen. 12 is next. I remember. If price and total revenue are inversely related, What is the price elasticity of demand? Now, a very important point with multiple choice is, with the best will in the world, even though these papers are checked and rechecked, not only for the standard of the question, but the language of the question as well. And so, it may be the case that you may misinterpret the meaning of this word inversely, and if you don't understand the word, you can't answer the question. So, just a cautionary note there, make sure you really understand the question that you're actually being asked. So if price and total revenue are inversely related, in other words, price falls, revenue goes up, price rises, revenue falls, what is the PED? So in this instance, you need to have in your mind the PED diagrams, which I shall just draw for you to remind you. So we could either have a PED which is elastic, like this, or inelastic, like this. So, let's see what happens and whether or not price and revenue are inversely related whenever price changes in an elastic market. So P1, Q1, price falls, so that's falling to P2, P2, that's Q2, so that's fallen, that's gone up, and as you know, total revenue is this area, P2, Q2, so price falls, revenue goes up, that's inverse. So that would suggest to me, ladies and gentlemen, that this is the answer, elastic. Let's just double check on the inelastic demand curve. So, if price falls from P1, if it falls, what's going to happen? Is revenue going to rise or is it going to fall? Well, if we take this down to P2, for example, P1 times Q1, sorry ladies and gentlemen, this pen is not working properly. Let's see if we can just sort this out. P1 and Q1, Q2. Right, so P1 times Q1 is our initial revenue. If price falls to P2, then output goes up, but only a little bit. It only goes up to Q2, and so total revenue falls. So price falls, total revenue falls. Hence, ladies and gents, the answer here is 12A. Okay, 13. Consumer and producer surplus. What happens if costs of production increase? So this is just draw a diagram, highlight consumer and producer surplus, and see what happens. So let's draw the diagram first of all. So we're talking about so here's supply, here's demand. P1, Q1. So, what's consumer surplus, what's producer surplus here? So, as you know, area above the price and below demand is consumer surplus, which is here. And above supply, below price is producer surplus. This is producer surplus. So if costs of production go up, the supply curve shifts from S1 to S2. So that now becomes our supply curve, S2. Now you've got to think, okay, at this new equilibrium, what has happened to producer surplus and consumer surplus? So again, it's a question of highlight the equilibrium and then indicate the area of producer and consumer surplus. So the consumer surplus has now fallen to this area above price and below demand, and the producer surplus, from being this rather large triangle here, The producer surplus is now this much smaller triangle here. So this hashed area here in effect is your producer surplus. So in both cases they've got smaller. Hence the answer, hopefully, is A. And then lastly, 14, minimum efficient scale. So again, we're thinking about our short run and long run cost curves of the firm. So the SACs and the LACs is the diagram that comes to mind. Costs, short run cost curves, and then eventually we hit the bottom here before they start to rise again. And of course, join all these together, you get your long run average cost curve. But this point here is your minimum efficient scale, where you're at the lowest possible average total cost. Hence the answer is A. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it at that, and I'll be back very shortly with the macro paper.